Hey there, I'm Peter Sachs, and that's the sound of the bebop dominant scale. It's a scale you can hear in the sound of virtually all the greats, from Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie through Wayne Shorter, Freddie Hubbard, Herbie Hancock, and countless others. These cats have all made effective use of this scale, and so can you. The bebop dominant scale is an essential part of the jazz language. It's at the core of the vocabulary we all need to know in order to improvise effectively. So what is the bebop dominant scale, and why do we use it? To answer those questions, let's take a step back and talk just a bit about the concept of the chord scale. A chord scale is a scale we use when improvising on a particular type of chord. We hear that scale as working well with or matched to a specific kind of chord. In order to figure out which chord scale to use on a chord, we look first at the third and seventh of the chord. That's because the third and seventh define the basic quality of the chord. Here's a C7 chord. C7 contains a major third, E, and a lowered or minor seventh, B flat. So the matching chord scale has to contain E and B flat. So here's the complete chord, and now I'm going to fill in the three notes between the chord tones. The result is a major scale with a lowered seventh, which we call the Mixolydian mode. But is matching the third and seventh enough? Well, let's find out. I'm going to play that Mixolydian scale over a C7. A 1, 2, 3, 4. What do you hear? Let me play it again. A 3, 4. Your ear might tell you that something isn't quite right. Let's listen one more time. I'm going to accent the downbeats. A 3, 4. Doesn't sound bad, but it doesn't sound as good as it could. And the problem isn't with the notes themselves, it's that the chord tones, the root, seventh, fifth, and third of C7 are falling on the upbeats, the ands, and not the downbeats. Check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Because the notes C, A, F, and D fall on the downbeats, our ear perceives the scale as outlining D minor 7 and not C7. And this is the critical point. In order for our ears to perceive a scale as outlining or indicating a dominant seventh chord, the chord tones must fall on the downbeats. I'm going to say that again. For us to perceive a scale as outlining a dominant 7 chord, the chord tones must fall on the downbeats, and that's why we use bebop dominant instead of Mixolydian. So, back to our original question. What is the bebop dominant scale? Well, in its simplest form, the bebop dominant scale simply adds a single chromatic note between the root and the lowered 7. On a C7, that note is B natural. Root, added note, lowered 7th. And then the rest of the Mixolydian scale unmodified. The addition of this one note realigns the scale so that the lowered 7th, 5th, and 3rd, the chord tones, now fall on the downbeats. A 2, 3, 4. A 2, 3, 4. So check this out. Assuming that we're playing eighth notes, the scale is exactly the same, whether we start on the root, the third, the fifth, or the seventh. So I'm going to give you some specific practice strategies in just a minute. But before I do, I think it's important to remember that when we blow on the changes, our goal is to clearly outline the chords and progressions that we're blowing on. If the listener can't hear the chord progressions and ultimately the entire tune, then we're just not improvising effectively. Our playing can end up sounding vague or meandering. When that happens, we can easily lose our audience, not to mention the cats in the band. So let's review the basic bebop dominant scale, descending from the root, a 3, 4. From the third, a 3, 4. From the fifth, and from the seventh. Again, notice that the interval structure of the scale never changes. The scale always contains that extra note, the major seventh between the root and the lowered seventh. This added note actually creates a series of 4 chromatic notes: root, major seventh, lowered seventh, sixth, so that this becomes aurally synonymous with the sound of the dominant 7th chord. So far, everything I've played started on beat 1. Well, not only is that boring, but in practice, players often start their phrases on beats 2, 3, and 4. So here's a suggested practice routine that includes that rhythmic variety. Choose a single chord, C7 in this case, and start with the root. Use a metronome or a play-along track so that you're practicing time and not just the notes. So you're going to play the scale descending starting on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4 successively like this. A 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2. A 1, 2, 3, 4. From the third, a 3, 4. 3, 4, 1. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. From the fifth, a 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2. A 1, 2, 3. And from the seventh, a 3, 4. 2, 3, 4, 1. And a 1, 2. A 1, 2, 3. You'll be amazed at how varying your rhythmic starting points opens up your ears to new phrase shapes and ideas. You may be wondering why we aren't practicing bebop dominant ascending as well as descending. That's because in common practice, the scale is used more frequently in descending form, while arpeggios are used more often to create ascending motion. It's the combination of the two devices, arps up, scales down, that defines the bebop sound. But that's a subject for another video. In addition to starting on the root 3rd, 5th, and 7th, 2 other starting points are commonly used, the 6th or 13th and the 9th or 2nd. When starting on the 6th or 13th, simply insert a chromatic note between 6 and 5. And then continue the scale as before. This extra note, the flatted 6th or 13th, makes the 5th fall on beat 2, 3, 4. A downbeat. Note that the flatted 6th is only inserted once. If you're practicing the scale over 2 octaves, the flatted 6th won't appear again. The rest of the scale, including the major 7th, remains unchanged. You can also play the scale descending from the 9th. Here we insert a chromatic note, the flatted 9th, between the 9th and the root, and then continue on with the scale. This creates a chromatic scale from the 9th all the way down to the 13th. The result is a line with a lot of forward motion, but notice that the chromaticism is highly functional. Chromatic notes are added so that the chord tones fall on the downbeats. So first get comfortable playing the scale from the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, and then you can add practicing from the 9th and from the 13th to your routine. So find yourself some good play-along tracks and get to work on these bebop dominant scales. You've got 12 keys, 6 starting pitches, and 4 rhythmic starting points. That's a lot of stuff to work on. And you need to really internalize these scales. And then make sure you use them consciously when you're blowing. The joy of improvisation is all about playing great time effortlessly, otherwise known as swinging. In order to swing, you've got to have some vocabulary. Bebop dominant is a core part of that vocabulary. It'll give you the fluency you need to really have fun blowing on dominant 7 chords. Happy practicing.